All right. Hello, how's everybody doing? It's Mr. Reed coming at you live from U203, and today we're going to be talking briefly about argumentation as it pertains to both your extracts and also the overarching issue that you are addressing in your larger thesis statement, as well as some questions I've been getting about concepts and how we are narrowing the focus of our work to reflect some of the conceptual analysis that we are doing for our global for our IO. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start. I'm going to have you guys go ahead and read this yourselves, but just remember that this is a uh, oral presentation dealing with global issues. And as we've talked about before, is that with any type of argumentation, really when we say argumentative essays or argumentative writing or argumentative presentations, we're really talking about persuasion, right? And so it's important to note that um, when we are composing our pieces, really you're trying to persuade your audience that a global issue, through the use of intertextuality, is conveyed and represented in different ways by different authors in their respective bodies of work, right? So we provide information, express an academic opinion, right? We are developing an analysis and asserting an original interpretation. And then we have a strong sense of context and knowledge about the text in which we are studying and persuading our audience of. We have an understanding of how the text is received or has been received, and then an understanding of the wider implications of our argument in relationship to how we see the issue working its way into these different bodies of work. Also, just a quick note, UNC Writing website document about how to write a proper and strong argumentative writing. Great resource. Actually have been to the school a number of times. Can't talk it up enough. So please make sure you check that out. And another minor thing here to just keep reference to is that I've shared this out many, many times, so I'm not going to go over it in depth here, but just remember that anytime we use a thesis statement, especially when pertaining to the extracts, when we're really doing our close reading, it's really important that we are able to highlight the ways in which the author applies the global issue, right? So that close reading. How are they communicating particular ideas, or how are they representing ideas? How are they sharing their own particular viewpoints or values in the text? And then finally, how we are receiving the text. That's the effect part, right? Being able to apply and see and be able to draw our own conclusions about a text. And so, really, when you think about like the fact that this is an authentic interpretation of a text, like we have to use cause and effect to elevate our own particular argument. So what I've done here is, this is actually a student from last year that did a I/O on a collection of Duffy poems, in particular zooming in on Medusa, and then also a Glutamax campaign ad, and then zooming in on a particular advertisement. So what I've done here is I've gone ahead and I've just highlighted the cause and effect components of the writing here, and I have also italicized what I would say the cause and effect verbs that again highlight the mechanics of the work, and then particularly explaining on how it relates to a particular global issue. And I know I'm going to hear students saying, okay, so Mr. Reed, I don't see examples of metaphor, personification, or juxtaposition, or anaphora. That's fine in this particular case. The expectation is obviously, because we're talking about the means in which the author communicates particular ideas or represents particular identities or shares a particular perspective, then we're going to need to really dig into the mechanics of the work, right? So make sure, again, that you are communicating that to me. But these are really some excellent examples of a cause and effect thesis statement for the thesis for your extract, right? And again, another really good example here. Again, the dividing of the cause and effect, and then also italicizing some of the verbs. But I mentioned down here the goal for both literary and non-literary assessment early on is to demonstrate the means and ways in which the global issue is presented within the larger body of work, and as mentioned last class, stating the academic literary lenses you may draw from, right? And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But one other thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of concepts, and that, I mean, here when we talk about perspective, we really are talking about the means in which we read and interpret text differently based on the identities of the audience, right? So perspective right there and then. But is that we have not kind of put concepts to the side here. Concepts are very much integrated within our arguments. No, there is no particular magic number of concepts that you need to drop in a thesis statement, but I would say, yeah, like in past, yeah, most students typically will touch on all 7 concepts within their argumentation, right? You think about like identity. You're looking at the ways in which identity is showcased in a text or a greater body of work from 2 very different authors. So yeah, you're going to want to talk about things like structuralism, how it pertains to things like class or disability, gender, race, right, so on and so forth. Like how is that meaningful, or how does that help with drawing and making your own conclusions about a particular global issue? The same thing with representation, like how an author showcases or portrays a particular group of people or a particular culture, and their own personal biases or viewpoints or their values. How is that being showcased within the text, right? That would obviously very much go and connect with our concept of communication as well, right? The ways in which an author communicates. Culture, what beliefs, attitudes, and values does the work represent, right? I mean, very much ties with our studies in things like identity, right? Or maybe we're talking about the cultures and belief and views of like the author or maybe the speaker, the subject of our work. Transformation, and we're using intratextuality so much as the basis for this I.O. But also many of you are drawing on things like pastiche or homage or using parody. You have texts that are borrowing from other texts. So I would expect that if that's the case, that you're obviously going to be talking about the relationship of that particular concept and how, again, the issue then is represented. And then finally, creativity. And you know, even if it's just like a newspaper article, like there's creativity that comes with that. But if you're looking at, let's say, a thing of art, or you're looking at some sort of like a graphic novel, like, yeah, of course, the way the text is created certainly has an impact on how we as different readers might interpret meaning in a text. Last thing, and again, if you have not watched or listened to some of these student samples, make sure you do. They are so good. And what I've done here is I have just typed out their overarching thesis statement. So this is the first main argument. This is where they are posting their concepts and they are posting their issues. And if you listen to student sample 5, or if you listen to student sample number 1, you'll hear that they are articulating more specific arguments within their extracts or maybe within their bodies of work, and they're talking about those concepts. So for example, student sample 5, an increasing number of people are forced to migrate and assimilate in foreign countries. As a result, immigrants are faced with 2 different cultures. In this individual oral, I will be addressing the question, how do 2 extracts and their respective bodies of work address the issues of cultural assimilation as a result of migration? So we have our global issue, and they are also working in the focal point, I guess you could say, of one of those particular concepts, with the expectation, obviously, that they're going to talk about all of those concepts later on in the work. Student sample number 1, I will be exploring the global issue of borders and how power imbalances enacted by law enforcement for citizens and non-citizens create physical and mental barriers. I will argue that those borders are the physical embodiment of man's tension with law enforcement that enables and abuses prejudice. This also prevents citizens and non-citizens from exploring their personhood as well as their identity. Right. So again, that global issue and the concept very much ingrained within the overarching focus of this piece. So that is it for me, folks. I will be on Zoom if you need to chat, if you would like to go through this a little bit more. But today, obviously, you are giving me more of a conceptual focus of your work. You're thinking a little bit more about your argumentation, and then you are spelling that out in your outline. So have a wonderful day.